Being from the UK, I've recently started to learn about the connection and relationship between the United Kingdom and Canada. There's a long, interesting history there. I've also started learning about the connection between my home country, Scotland, and Canada. Now, this is absolutely fascinating me because I knew very little of it before, but really enjoying that exploration. And another relationship I'm interested in learning more about with regards to Canada is the relationship between Canada and the United States of America. Two countries that are neighbours, brothers, probably two countries that have a lot of similarities but a lot of differences also, and I'm interested to explore those more, the dynamic between these two countries. I'm really interested to know, what do Canadians think of Americans? What do Americans think of Canadians? What do Canadians think of America as a country? And what do Americans think of Canada as a country as well? Interested to know more about this relationship. I'm going to start by this exploration today by looking at this video. It's Tom Brokaw explains Canada to Americans. Now, I never knew anything of Tom before, but I googled him before this video and learned that he's an American journalist. So this is like an American explaining Canada to Americans, which is an interesting concept in itself for me. Let's check it out.
This is the Peace Arch, standing near the westernmost edge of the U.S.-Canadian border, 30 miles south of the Olympic City, between Blaine and Washington State, and Surrey, British Columbia. This was dedicated in 1921 to commemorate the treaty that ended the War of 1812 between the U.S. and Great Britain. Remember, Canada was a British colony. That was a long time ago, but the inscription on the arch sums up the relationship. May these gates never be closed.
Wow, such an important message that really shows the strength of the relationship between Canada and America. Now, this monument itself, I never knew anything of it before. Tell me if you've ever been here. But it's an interesting monument, the Peace Arch, because it actually pays respect to the past with regards to the signing of that treaty that ended the war. But it also looks to the future as well with this message, and it shows that strength and relationship between these two countries. So great monument. I'm interested to know more about the military history between these two countries. Of course, being British, that probably Britain has an impact on that as well. Interested to know more, so tell me more about them as well.
We share more than a long border, of course. No dotted line can divide our joint stewardship of a treasure of natural riches.
Sure.
From the Atlantic to the Pacific, and back again. Shorelines, wild rivers, and Great Lakes, vast forest and grasslands. Precious ores buried in majestic mountains, and wildlife everywhere. From sea to shining sea.
That's what I've got to say as well, yeah. Since I started this channel and learned about Canada, I've been absolutely blown away and stunned by the natural beauty of Canada. I already knew it was a beautiful country, but really learning more deeply about the country from coast to coast, it's just absolutely stunning. I wonder if Americans really appreciate how much natural beauty Canada has. Do a lot of Americans go there for holidays and things like that? Is it appreciated by them?
And the United States share another unique quality. They're immigrant nations, destinations for people around the world who long for political freedoms, economic opportunity, and a long tradition of compassion.
That's true as well. I wonder how the immigration situation differs or is similar in each of these countries. From an outsider, I know that Canada and the USA are probably the two most highly in demand countries for immigrants to want to move to. They treat immigrants very well. There's a lot of benefits. Just the quality of life in these two countries is great. But I wonder how policies differ between these two countries. Are either of these countries more welcoming to immigrants? Do immigrants have a better quality of life in either of these two countries for any reason? Tell me more about the intricacies between those two countries in that respect.
Our two nations have the largest trading relationship in the world. $1.5 billion transacted every day. The two-way trade at the Ambassador Bridge between Detroit and Windsor alone equals all American exports to Japan.
Whoa, that's huge.
And we're so comfortable as neighbors. 200 million people cross the common border every year. Canada, some may be surprised to learn, is America's largest oil supplier. And the United States is Canada's #1 tourist destination.
So they're like very intrinsically linked, these two countries, although they're neighbours and that would maybe be expected. It's not always the case, but you see their economies really have a big impact on each other. Not only are they strong historically, just with regards to things like the military and so on, and being allies, when it comes to the economies, they're very strong together also.
In a snapshot, Canada is a huge country, second largest in the world next to Russia. But its population is only about a tenth the size of the United States, 34 million, split into 10 provinces and 3 territories. 90% of Canadians live within 100 miles of the U.S. border.
That's the interesting thing. You see how spread up about America the population is, and how Canada is so concentrated. Obviously, that's just a quirk of the Canadian geography, considering the landscapes and the weather and that sort of thing. But it's just something that's one of those stark differences between these two countries.
Residing in world-class cities, thriving farms and smaller towns. With good reason. Life in the Canadian North is only for the hardy. It is remote and oh so cold. The coldest day ever recorded in North America occurred in 1947 in Snag, Yukon. Minus 81 degrees, not including wind chill.
Jesse the Sponge.
Canadians are so generous, they share with us their brightest stars in music, comedy, acting, sports, and journalism.
Yeah, that's a good point as well, because I feel like a lot of American pop culture, Canada has an influence on that, whether it's singers, movie stars, like you see presenters and that sort of thing as well. So, but I wonder sometimes, like, do Canadians really get enough respect for their impact on that popular culture? Because I feel like a lot of Canadian celebrities sometimes will get confused for Americans by people outside of the country. Maybe even Americans might confuse them for Americans as well.
If you're in a fight, you want the Canadians on your side. They were in World War II before we were. They were there on D-Day, in the air and on the beaches. They've been America's most reliable partners in Afghanistan, and it's been costly and painful.
Yeah, that's what I've got to say. I wonder, I know that American military professionals will definitely respect and appreciate what the Canadian military is. One of the strongest militaries in the world, the Canadians, man. From what I've learned, Canadian military is just such a high quality military. I know that American military professionals will appreciate that. Does the general American populace, do they appreciate how strong the Canadian military is? I know that Americans can sometimes be stereotypically thought of as being very inward facing and just focusing on themselves and on America, which is fair enough because it is a great country. But do you think the normal Americans respect the Canadian military professionals as much as they should?
Now, when Canada loses a warrior in that distant land, the nation pauses and honors the fallen along what is called the Highway of Heroes outside of Toronto.
Okay. Yeah, someone mentioned that in my comments and asked me to make a reaction to something to do with that. Tell me more about that. Is it worth doing a reaction to? Tell me more about what it actually is.
Even their diplomats have been there for us. In 1980, a year before the conclusion of the Iranian hostage crisis, 6 American embassy personnel would escape from Iran in an operation organized by Canadian Ambassador Ken Taylor.
The United States is thanking Canada for rescuing those 6 American diplomats from Iran.
Taylor hid the Americans after the U.S. Embassy was stormed, created fake Canadian passports, then flew the Americans out of Tehran with a bogus cover story. The 6 in disguise as a mod-looking Hollywood film crew, allegedly researching a prospective sci-fi flick. Now, all these years later, Taylor has admitted he was formerly working for the CIA. And if the Iranians had discovered he was an American spy, he would have been in big, big trouble.
That was the movie Argo, I believe. Just listening to that kind of the story there. I watched Argo a couple of years ago. Very interesting movie. But to see these moments in history, these are huge momentous moments. Like, that was a huge story. They got Canadian passports. Canada had a huge influence on this moment, which is such a memorable moment in American history. to know that Canada really saved those people, man, it's such a fantastic thing.
In our darkest hours, Canada has been with us. On September 11th, as the United States shut down its airspace, Canada instituted Operation Yellow Ribbon, landing 239 U.S.-bound flights with 33,000 passengers at 17 different Canadian airports. And then, amid the uncertainty that followed, entire communities housed and fed those thousands of passengers for days afterward.
Wow. Such a fantastic example of humanity. In such a time of need for the USA, Canada really stepped up, man, and like helped so many people. And it wasn't just like immediately, they were like continuing to help these people. That is the strength of that relationship, man. It's absolutely beautiful. Again, you can look at countries all over the world. Would they have similar responses? I don't know, but to see the Canadians have that response to such a terrible time, again in American history, to see that Canadians stepped up, that actually makes me so happy, man.
In the long history of sovereign neighbors, there never has been a relationship as close, productive, and peaceful as the U.S. and Canada. We share a continent and so much more. Speaking before the Canadian Parliament, President Kennedy summarized the relationship this way.
Geography has made us neighbors. History has made us friends. Economics has made us partners. And necessity has made us allies.
Wow. Fantastic
Those whom
words.
nature hath so joined together, said Kennedy, let no man put asunder.
Of course, there are some distinct differences in the culture. The American fans at these games will be unfurling their stars and stripes at every opportunity and chanting USA, USA. The Canadian Prime Minister had to go before Parliament yesterday and urge Canadians to engage in what he called an uncharacteristic outburst of patriotism, saying, don't be afraid to wave those flags. We'll apologize to the world for our immodesty later. So that's a big difference now.
He hopes he has to do it very often. You know what struck me in that piece among all of the items? There are more people in California than there are in all of Canada.
Well, and Canada has a stronger and more sound economy at this point as well. That's a distinctive difference between the two.
Perfectly put.
That's very true. Like, as much as we learned about the incidents that's happened throughout history between these two countries and learned about nature and how they share these things, when you think about the differences between Americans and Canadians and personality-wise, it was kind of summed up there in the way they were going to celebrate and support their sports teams. This looks like it's for the Vancouver Olympics, so I'm interested to know more about that with regards to the differences between the people themselves. Two fantastic countries. I want to know more about this relationship from the people watching this video. Tell me more about your opinions, your thoughts. Tell me more in the comments. Thanks.